Hey, I'm Nick Von Brack, and this is the Record Podcast. Back here with another episode. This one's with my friend Jared Karns. He is the current drummer of Hidden Hospitals, but he was also once the drummer of a band Kiss Kiss who we toured with back in the day. And it was a good little catch-up, talking about how he got in the music industry, how he got into music at all, being in Kiss Kiss and other bands along the way, and we didn't even really get to talk about Hidden Hospitals, so we're going to have to do a part 2 of this. So we'll just have to get back with him in a little while and see what his history was like getting into Chicago and joining that band. But this is a good little interview, and I hope you all enjoy it. We've got some good ones lined up in the future, so yeah, here it is. You moved to Chicago, what, a good 4 or 5 years ago now, or even longer than that?
5 years ago. I just passed my 5-year anniversary, okay. October 1st, yeah.
So where did you grow up then?
In Binghamton, New York.
Yeah.
It's upstate, about halfway between New York City and Buffalo.
Okay.
But more south than, say, like Syracuse or some of those towns. Like, it's almost the Pennsylvania border. Okay. So it's a little north of there. It's kind of a medium to small size city, and it's got like a really big college there, but it's more of a like a technical and kind of like law type school. Mm-hmm. And I had no interest in going in either of those fields when I was around, like high school age. And I definitely had no interest in staying in my hometown. I wanted to get out of there as quick as possible. I wanted to move somewhere where there were musicians that would challenge me. I mean, I was in bands in high school, but it was all just kind of like punk rock, and no one really had any interest in really like making it their life or making it their career. It was all just kind of a fun thing. So I wanted to go somewhere where there were like people who wanted to make music their life, and the most obvious option was New York City. It was only 3 hours down the road, and I just started looking at colleges in that area, and stumbled across a SUNY school called Purchase, and it's about 40 minutes north of New York City. And I was like, well, it's not the city, but it's close enough. And like the first time I went and checked it out, I was like instantly, I was really into it. I was like, this is the exact kind of school I want to go to. This is a really great campus, and it was everything that my high school wasn't. I hated high school so much. I had maybe 10 friends that understood what I was all about, and we would all hang out together. It was just like a herd. Yeah. And we were into punk rock, like the rest of my school was just, jocks. If you didn't listen to like Puff Daddy or whatever, then, you were getting your ass beat. And, it was just a really not a very good scene. And I checked out Purchase and was just like, yeah, there's people who like get rock music and punk rock and stuff like that, and they're kind of weirdos, and I was like, this is what I wish high school was. So I was like, I need to get out of my hometown, and I need to go to a school like this. And I mean, I applied for a couple other places too. There was this place called the New School in New York City. Okay. And it would have been like really expensive. It was a private school, and I would have been going there for jazz drumming, which was not as much my thing as what I ended up going to Purchase for, which was more contemporary and classical percussion. Okay. So I mean, I was learning like not improvised, but written out and arranged music from composers all the way. I mean, I was taking music history classes too, so I was learning about music all through history, but most of the music I played was, from anywhere from, say, like the 18th century all the way up until today. Wow. So I got in there as kind of like a punk rock drummer, right. And you and I know what that pretty much means is, yep. Your dominant hand is going to be super fast, mm-hmm. but then you're going to get kind of lazy with your non-dominant hand.
Oh, that's me today still.
Yeah, with my left hand.
Yep.
The first time I played like a marimba, which is kind of a xylophone. It's like a mallet instrument, mm-hmm. For one of my professors. I mean, I had studied some of that stuff in high school too. So I thought I knew what I was doing. So I go in and I play a scale for my professor, and he was like, your hands look really different. Your right hand looks like it's trying to overcompensate for the weaknesses of your left hand, and then your left hand seems like it's really kind of like almost like jazzed out, like it's almost like you're trying to play too much with your wrist while your right hand is almost kind of, so it was almost like I was trying to play like
Punk rock
jazz, like
marimba.
exactly, yeah. So basically, what ended up happening was any of my right-handed notes were coming out very loud, while my
Oh yeah.
left-handed notes were very quiet. So he was like, "I want you to balance out your right and your left hand to make it so that all of your notes come out the same, and then you can start thinking about dynamics like, okay, do I want all these to be, loud, or do I want them all to be soft? But
Yeah.
to start, your technique has to become more consistent.
Yeah.
So I mean, I was learning that. I was learning snare drum technique. I was learning timpani, and I did that for 2 years. It was supposed to be a 4-year program, but what happened around my sophomore year was I started doing exactly what I went there to do, which was meet people in bands.
Yeah.
And I joined like 2 bands at the same time in my freshman in my the fall semester of my sophomore year. And this was after freshman year, just completely immersing myself in getting my technique good. I didn't really, like I met a couple people in bands, but I basically just spent a year doing that. And then I met these guys. I was living on the same floor with these guys who played in a band, and they told me that their drummer was quitting to focus on a jazz career. So I was like, yeah, I'll play with you guys. I really like your music. And at the time, I mean, this was early college. I was really into what they were doing, which was kind of like almost it was like they were like a Taking Back Sunday kind of emo band. Like,
Okay. And what were they called? Do you remember their name?
They were called Murdoch when
Okay.
when I first joined the band, and then we had a couple name changes after that. But that was what they were called when I first joined the band. And around the same time, I also joined this band with this guy named Josh and these 2 other guys, Andrew and John, and I had seen them play around Purchase a couple times, and I really liked their music. It was like it was very Radiohead, the Benz era, like Radiohead, rock Radiohead, and I was like, I'd watch them, I'd be like, this is the kind of band I could totally play with. This is the kind of band I would like to play with, and then I just happened to be in a music history class with the bass player Andrew, and we also happened to be living in the same suite. So there was one night he walked by my room, and I was blasting King Crimson, the first King Crimson album, and he was just like, "Dude, you like Crimson?" I was just like, "Yeah," and he was just like, "Man, that's awesome." So maybe a couple weeks later, after at the end of music history class, he comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, my band's drummer announced that he's leaving to pursue a cruise ship job. He's gonna go play on a cruise ship, and we need a drummer." And I was just like, "Yeah, I'd really like to come by a practice and see what you guys are all about." And I had my kit in my percussion practice space, and they were practicing in the room like literally right across the hall from there.
Perfect.
So I brought my drums. I carried my drums right over, and we set up. And they had already given me like a demo, like 6 songs to learn, and I spent like a couple days leading up to that just kind of air drumming the songs in my room. Like I didn't really have a whole lot of space or a whole lot of time to practice drum set really, because I was a percussion student, so I was really supposed to be practicing marimba and snare drum and timpani and the pieces I was in for about 6 hours every day.
Oh wow.
So I wasn't really practicing drum set very much. But here was this opportunity to play drum set with this band, which was really what I wanted to be doing. So I spent enough time just kind of listening to the songs, working out the arrangements, and I was like, yeah, like this will be totally cool. So I go in there and I just played these songs with these guys, and they were like, yeah, I think this is going to work. And that band was Fetal Orchestra, they were called. And the guy Josh, who I was telling you about, is Josh from Kiss
Yeah,
Kiss.
Mr. Benesh.
Yeah, so that was the first band I was in with Josh.
Wow. Okay.
We were about 20 years old, I think. But yeah, I mean that record was that I mean they already had a couple records that they had done with their previous drummers. They had a couple guys before me.
Gotcha.
But the record that I did with them, we recorded it in Brooklyn at the studio of this guy Dan Romer, who is now actually kind of he's doing pretty well for himself. I don't know if you've heard of that movie Beasts of the Southern Wild.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
Yeah, he did the score for that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so yeah, he recorded the Fetal Orchestra EP.
That's crazy.
Because we all went to Purchase together. Like it was him, it was me, Josh, these other dudes, and like Purchase was just kind of like it was like a breeding ground for like all these people who ended up going on to do really awesome things. Like Dan Deacon went there the same time I went there. Um, who else? Jenny Owen Youngs. I don't, but who else? Regina Spektor went there a couple years before I did. Like, yeah, Purchase was like the place to go if you wanted to be like an alternative like rock or indie musician who also kind of like understood like art music. So yeah, but at the time I was going there, there was no way of knowing. It was
Right.
really there were a couple famous alumni, but not really in music so much. It was more like Wesley Snipes. It was more like in the actor world.
That's a pretty good pull.
Yeah,
Wesley Snipes.
Parker Posey was the other one.
Man,
Yeah, we had a lot of people who were graduates from. Oh, Moby was the other one.
nice.
Yeah. So as far as music, Moby
Yeah.
was the one that everyone kind of like talked about. As,
Yeah.
hey, you're going to, but he didn't major in music there. He majored in like sociology or something
You
like
know,
that.
when you said Moby, for some reason, I had the thought like, and I bet he didn't even go there for music at all.
He
He
didn't.
probably, yeah, that sounds
Right.
right.
He discovered music later. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure he was doing a little bit of music
Right.
there, but he was a sociology major, I believe, something within the humanities. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't just an art school. It was also like a liberal arts school that
Oh,
had all
okay.
these different like humanities majors and things like that.
Yeah.
So when I started getting super busy with playing in bands and everything, like I joined those two bands at the same time, just about, and then I joined this other band that was sort of a side project of the bassist in Fetal Orchestra, and they were playing with the old drummer in Fetal Orchestra.
Okay.
So it gets very confusing
Yeah.
and sort of incestuous.
Yeah,
But
I was just gonna say.
since they already had a drum set player, they wanted to add a kind of like a percussionist, like a trash percussionist, to
Yeah.
like to play like random odds and ends and like trash can lids and like artillery shells and
Yeah.
all this like metallic percussion and everything like that. And I mean, that was pretty much kind of what I was already studying in college. So I was like, yeah, this will be really cool.
Yeah.
And also around the same time, I joined this band called Jet Orange, which was kind of a they were very like super drag influenced.
So that's band number 4 at the same time.
Yes, I was in 4 bands at the same time at one point, and it was getting really kind of stressful to sort
Yeah.
of like balance out my life and sort of figure out the timing. Like occasionally, it would be to the point where I would play 2 different shows in the same night. Like
That's
two of the
crazy.
bands would both have shows, and luckily it was all around. I didn't have to travel too much. It was all within 40 minutes of each other, you know. But it still got
Yeah.
a little stressful. Like, you know, like I'd have one show or I'd have like a percussion concert or something like that to do, and then I'd have to go directly from there to the Murdoch show and like get set up my drum set, you know, or just kind of like have those guys bring my set in the van, you know, and go straight to the show and like play punk rock with them, you know. I mean, I wouldn't do it any other way. I mean, it was very
Right.
stressful, but for the time that it was happening, it seemed like the right thing for me to be doing. And from getting that busy, I kind of was like, okay, I need to focus on what I really want to do at this
Yeah.
point. So I first was like, okay, I don't even know if I even want to stay in college if I'm this busy and if I'm this successful at doing what I really want to be doing. Like I can always get, continue getting my chops together.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to really have these opportunities again. So I should really just focus on this. So I was thinking about like the one band that I was in, the kind of Murdoch, they were based out of Queens. So one idea that I had was, okay, if I'm going to stay in college, then I might as well transfer maybe to a college that's closer to where they're based. So I was thinking for a little while about transferring to this college in Queens, like in New York City, basically. That would have been more of a like a community college kind of, and I would not have been focusing as much on playing music. I would have just been kind of like undeclared at first, and I would have just wanted to be focusing, as much full time as possible on just playing with that band.
So was this going to school thing still like? Was that a thing for like you were doing it for your parents, or you still were like, yeah, I still want to go to school for something? Like, did you ever think I'm just going to quit school completely and just go into band?
I did think that for a little while, but I think there was a little bit of pressure to kind of to not be a college dropout.
Yeah,
I was, and besides all the other guys in that band, they were also, staying in school and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This wasn't so much a conversation like with my parents or anything like that. This is more of a conversation with those guys.
Yeah.
They were like, well, I mean, we're all still in school. Nobody's quitting. Like, you might as well like do pretty much the same thing we're doing, and we'll all kind of like be in the same boat. We'll all kind of grow together, and they were honestly the band out of the four bands I was in. They seemed to me to be the one that I thought had the best chance of kind of having commercial success,
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, yeah, like this is the one that I want to focus on, Mm-hmm. So what ended up happening was, I think that band did a couple tours, and I kind of realized that I didn't really get along with them very well. It was the it was the kind of thing where actually going on tour with them kind of made me realize that, it was just like a lot of butting heads. And when I would get back home, I would practice with Fetal Orchestra, and I really seemed to get along with those guys a little better. And and then around the same time, I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay at Purchase and continue playing with those guys, but I need to just change my major. I need to make it so that I'm not pressured to practice these things that aren't really my top priority for 6 hours a day. I need to do something where I can stay in college, but make my main focus playing music and touring. Mm-hmm. So I basically changed my major to something more in the humanities, which was journalism. So really the way I looked at it was like, okay, 2 years, that's enough time to get what I wanted to get out of this. And, I fixed up my technique. I learned a lot of kind of exercises from them that I still use now.
Yeah.
I just like those 2 years were so invaluable, even though I didn't continue on to junior, senior year and do my my recitals and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I still learned a ton. I still have these books that I got from that time that are still very valuable to me. And I still learned a ton of stuff that helped me through, learning all the Kiss Kiss music, and even helped me now with writing with Hidden Hospitals. So it definitely did help. And I went on a 5-year plan for college. I spent the last 3 years I was there being a journalism major while basically doing Kiss Kiss. Kiss Kiss effectively formed, I remember the date, it was September 4th of 2003. That was the day that, we started junior year, and I had basically just had a meeting with the bass player slash like the guy who was basically in charge of Murdoch, which had eventually became, here's a little side note, we eventually started calling ourselves Only Hope, but we kind of felt that sounded too Christian, so we eventually changed our name to Man Explodes. We were called Man Explodes when we came back to school. I had a little meeting with the bass player, and he was like, "Do you still want to do this?" And I was like, "No, no, I don't think it's going to work out, just because just obviously we just haven't really been getting along, and
Yeah.
the band as a whole had kind of just we stagnated. We started doing that thing that I've noticed that when bands start to do this, that's how you know it's kind of ending, is when or something has to change, is when the band only gets together maybe one night or one day a week, and that one time they get together, it's maybe 2 hours, and
Yeah.
everyone seems like they're itching to get out of there.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
everyone seems like they don't really want to be there,
Yep.
and it's like a pain just to get people to get together.
Yep.
So that was where our band was at. Like, no one really seemed like they wanted to be there. The couple little tours that we had done ended with people fighting and yelling at each other, and it was just a really bad situation. So I was like, yeah, I think we better put this to bed. So literally, like, the next day, and keep in mind, during this time between when Josh and I had first started playing together,
Mm-hmm.
and at this point, Fetal Orchestra had broken up, and then Josh and I continued playing together, but without really a name. It was mainly just Josh's solo stuff, and I would just drop by his house in Yonkers, which is kind of close to Purchase. It was like sort of halfway between Purchase and the city, like
Okay.
the first suburb outside of New York City. I would go to his place, set up my drums, and we would just record demos. We would just he would just say, "Hey, I got these new songs to work on," and we would just do it. And then we'd bring other guys by, like our friend Bob, who eventually became the first violinist for Kiss Kiss. He actually laid down some tracks on that, and that was kind of one of the things that got Josh experimenting with incorporating like violin in his music. We had this friend Bob, who, it's like, how many people do you meet who are like rock violinists?
Yeah. That's
And
few and far between.
yeah, and he was like, "Hey man, like, record. I got all this music, record on it." So he would come by and play on it, and then we were still using Andrew every now and then to play bass. So really, it was all the same guys from Fetal Orchestra without John. But
Gotcha.
since John was one of the guys who formed the band, we couldn't keep using the name. So effectively, what that was Josh's solo stuff, and we kind of put it out very, very soft release. It was never like really like pressed or anything like that. It was just like
Yeah.
we would get a case of CDRs and just stomp. We would buy the Stomper at CompUSA.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This was 2003.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And just like stomp the artwork onto the CDRs,
Yep.
and then we would have like the jewel cases that we would also buy at CompUSA, and just put them all together, and we made a few copies, and made a little record that was just the name of the project was Silver Suns, but it was basically Josh's music, with all of us just kind of like donating our time and recording tracks for it, and it ended up being a really cool record. And a couple of those songs actually ended up being Kiss Kiss songs that we actually tried to record on a couple of our first records, but there was one song that just never came together the same as it was on that record. There was something about those raw recordings that were better than what we eventually tried to do with those songs. So yeah, so that's what had been basically going on in that previous summer, leading up to junior year of college. So Josh and I had continued playing together. So we get back to college. I have that meeting with Man Explodes, and effectively with that meeting, I'm not in any bands. I went from being in like 4 bands to all of a sudden being in like no bands.
Yeah.
So I was completely a free agent. I wasn't studying percussion anymore. I was just kind of like, studying journalism. I was a liberal arts major. So a lot of this kind of changed. And then Josh called me, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to get together and like actually like start a new actual band, like not just us screwing around in the studio with my demos, but actually writing music together? I mean, this is probably the time to do it." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So that was the beginning of Kiss Kiss. And while not all the members were like standard at first.
Yeah.
We still had Andrew from Vital Orchestra playing on our first EP. He played the bass on that album, and Bob was brought in as a full-time member. Even though he was also playing, he was playing in that side project. They were actually called Skeleton Breath.
Okay. That's
He
a good
was,
name.
yeah, it's a Captain Beefheart reference.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I learned about Captain Beefheart through you guys, touring with you guys. I didn't know what that was until
yeah,
we toured
yeah,
together. That and Tiny Tim.
yeah, yeah.
I learned a
So
lot that tour.
yeah, yeah. I learned a lot of stuff from Josh as well, just from playing with him.
Yeah.
And yeah, and Bob was originally the violin player in Skeleton Breath, so we were
Okay.
sharing a bass player and violinist with Skeleton Breath at that point.
Okay.
But Andrew, he was just kind of a fill-in. He wasn't ever like an official member, as much as I would have wanted him to be. Like
Yeah.
he was, even to this day, I still think he's the best bass player I've ever played with.
Gotcha.
The guy's just, he is bass player incarnate. I really wanted him to join. I really wanted him to join the band, but he wanted to focus his time on Skeleton Breath, and
Sure.
and Bob was a little bit more willing to kind of divide his time, and he actually helped write. He wrote like half of our songs, like half the songs that we started off with. When we just started writing, like 7 or 8 of them were Josh's, and the other 7 or 8 were Bob's. And Josh normally likes to kind of just like keep the writing like his thing.
Yeah.
But Bob was like just that rare guy that Josh was willing to kind of share writing responsibility with, because they were both really good at writing melodies.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing that Josh was all about. Like, I want to write with somebody who can contribute actual melodies, and when we can build that, and like, I don't care if it ends up being a thing where some of the songs are Josh songs and some of the songs are Bob songs, and some of them we work on together. As long as what we end up coming up with all ends up sounding like Kiss Kiss, then that's fine.
Yeah.
And what it ended up being was the first song on the first EP, Says My Doctor. That was the one song that was really a true collaboration between those two.
Gotcha.
Like Bob wrote that violin melody, that da 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 da. That was completely a Bob song, and he had a verse, chorus, and then we as a band figured out where to go from there. So you can kind of hear this like beautiful lilting kind of thing happen, and then the end is just dissonant, gross. It becomes this monster.
Yeah.
It becomes this complete other thing that I don't think Bob would have wanted it to like it. By him sharing that song with us, we basically kiss-eyed it.
Yeah, kiss.
We made it crazy.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was we recorded that 5-song demo, which became our EP. It was originally only supposed to be a demo. It was really originally only supposed to be like a self-released, Comp USA kind of,
Right.
DIY thing to sell for $5 at shows.
Yeah.
And eventually that ended up being picked up by Eyeball and re-released with new artwork and everything. But
Yeah.
originally that was just the demo, and around that same time, those were like the best 5 songs that we wanted to lay down at that point.
Yeah.
We had a lot of other songs, but those were the 5 that we really felt were going to work for that. And so after we started touring on that, we just continued writing songs, and eventually we had enough for what would become the first full length. But around that point, Bob left, and he basically took most of his songs with him.
Oh.
So
That's
effectively,
that's an
Yeah.
interesting thing to think about. Like,
yeah,
we're writing these songs together, and he's like, "Right, these are mine now." Like, yeah, how do you?
yeah.
What was that like? Were you guys like, "Oh, okay," or did you try to like divvy up parts of song? Like, it was like a divorce. Like, he's taking half the house or something.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. And honestly, it wasn't like a couple of those songs we did work on a lot and really kind of fleshed out, but a lot of them we hadn't really developed to the point where they were like album ready anyway.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, I guess it's kind of a good thing that it didn't get any further than that. But yeah, effectively what we were left with was, maybe about 7 songs that Josh had written for the full length.
Yeah.
And so we got a new violin player in the band, and he was just this guy that we found on Craigslist,
Nice.
and he wasn't a writer at all. So basically, all of the writing responsibility ended up being on Josh at this point.
Gotcha.
And so in at this point we had signed with we were working with Eyeball basically, and they were like, hey, we need you guys in the studio by September of this year. I believe that's the way it worked. And by this point, it was July. So we had 7 songs of a 10-song full length ready to go. So we were like, all right, we need to write 3 songs in the next 2 months.
Wow.
So me and Josh, we were at his place, and he was like, hey, I got a couple songs. I want you to hear these. And he just starts playing this like and I was like, are you crazy? This is not us.
Yeah.
Are you joking? Like what are you doing?
Yeah.
And he was like, just go with me on this. This is gonna be cool. This is gonna be cool. We are gonna make like a bizarre like Turtles ripoff kind of, like just bizarre. Like we're gonna make this cool. Like don't worry about it. And then I was like, what's the other one? And he goes just like, all right, do that, do that, do that, do that, do that, do that, do that. This like polka, like this really bizarre kind of like, with like these really bizarre like time changes and stuff like that. And I was just like, that is also not us.
Yeah.
Like you want to just put a polka song on the record? Like what's wrong with you? Like how is that ever going to work? And he was like, just trust me.
Just trust me.
So there was a big leap of faith there. And then, so we just started working on those songs little by little, just he and I. And then we, brought the bass in, which by that point, I think Pat was with us already at that point.
Okay.
And so, Pat, we got the bass parts down with him. And then by that point, also, we had yet another violin player because that dude I was just telling you about didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And she just picked up the songs real fast. And then those songs ended up coming together really well. And actually, the end of Satellite, we were like, hey, how do we want to end this? Like, we don't want to just end it on like a high note. We want to like do something weird. So that was actually Pat and I who kind of like we would practice in the classrooms at Purchase. So it was Pat and I writing on a chalkboard, like explaining to the others what we wanted to do. We were like, hey, so like we have that thing that happens in the bridge where it's like bum 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 bum. It's like a 5/6, but it's like chromatic,
Yeah.
It's like whole tone scale or something like that. So we were like, hey, why don't we do this like kind of like Stravinsky-esque, like almost King Crimson, like where that melody is going, but we're doing like hits against it. But it's like an override where like those 5 notes are happening in this like sequential, almost Steve Reich kind of thing. And then we just keep doing like this obstinate kind of thing against it. It's where it's like boom, bum, boom, bum, 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 boom, bum, boom, bum, boom, like that. And that was how we decided to end it. We were all just like blown away. We were just like, yeah, that's gonna be awesome. That's the way to end this song. It's gonna be great.
Did you ever end up showing like I don't know how close you were with teachers at the school, but did you ever like pass along Kiss Kiss stuff to anyone? Because I feel like had they heard what you guys made as a band, they'd be like, because if you were to say like, a lot, I mean, I guess it might be different that kind of school, but lots of schools would be like, oh, you're going off to start a band, whatever. But this Kiss Kiss is the kind of band that's like, without having gone to school, that school, like, I just feel like that'd be an opportunity to show them. They'd be like, hey, I'm proud of this. Like, you definitely learned your chops here and put together a sweet band.
Yeah, I personally never have, but Josh has a bit, because he was actually studying music production and composition there.
Yeah, okay.
He was a studio composition major, and so a lot of Kiss Kiss songs actually kind of started as class assignments.
Right.
Not very many of them, but a couple, and a lot of it, his teachers, they had to listen to what he was working on. So that happened. And also, yes, there was a little bit of, we would like that first EP, when it actually got pressed on Eyeball, we definitely gave one of his professors a copy of it, and like they put it up in the little glass case of like alumni projects,
Nice.
And same thing with the first record, the first full length. We definitely did that.
That's
And
awesome.
but yeah, for the most part, not really. Yeah, I mean, that was about the extent of it. I mean,
Okay.
they definitely were aware of our presence on campus, but we were always a little bit off the beaten path.
Right.
That was kind of the story of that band. Is
Yeah.
like, we were never like, the professors were always just kind of like, all right, well, Josh is just going to do his weird thing, and those guys are just going to do their weird thing. Like, as far as things that they really wanted to represent from the school, it was way more like pop kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Like they really wanted to. They were more like, yeah, that Kiss band, they're kind of weird, and they play here. They do awesome shows, but as far as actual records, it's better off if we just let them do their own thing. It was never. They were really more about showing off.
Gotcha.
What can we get on the radio?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. As a school, you want people to get big and then talk about going to that school and get more people to come to your
Exactly.
school. But that just feels like those are the like maybe teachers or the like faculty say that's what they want, but in the back of their head they really want like Kiss kind of bands to come out of that school because those are the guys and girls who are like profound technically and know their chops and are like actually putting together really complex music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was definitely we were definitely a little bit more on the side lanes, kind of, and just kind of
Yeah.
doing our own thing. And we had started working with kind of like a punk rock label, and we started touring with more like punk rock bands,
Yeah.
and that kind of wasn't really what they were going for. It wasn't that there wasn't punk rock at
Right.
Purchase. It's just everyone kind of had to do it their own way. I mean, there were shows all the time. I had a lot of friends who were in bands and putting on shows, and that was kind of the scene that we just sort of found ourselves like immersed in
Yeah.
because there wasn't really anyone else who was really going to accept us. It was just like play shows with these kinds of bands. I mean, other than that band I told you about earlier, Fireflies. I mean, they were our friends, and they were also like music, composition majors. They that we would do a lot of shows with them, but other than that, as far as like when we would hit the road, I mean, most of the bands we were playing with were like, granted this was early 2000s.
Right.
It was a lot of like, each town was different. It wasn't
Sure.
like we were setting up like package tours or anything like that. It was like we would set up like a mini tour of the Northeast, and there we would play like somewhere in like New Hampshire, and we play somewhere in like Vermont, and like we would just be playing in these like little scenes, these little local college scenes where it was like kind of other bands that they could vary anywhere from being like just straight up like punk rock to being like kind of weirdos like us, and
Yeah.
we would always try to make friends with the bands who were like kind of weirdos.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we would like set up tours. It was like we would go on these little tours, make friends with those bands, and then start to like work on more dates with some of the bands that we got along a little better with musically, and as far as our personalities.
I think that's a good way to go because I think for the most part, up and coming bands who are inexperienced with touring, they go, okay, we want to get, even if you only play like locally within, 10 miles of where you live, you're going, I want a big band to pick us up and take us everywhere. But I think the smart route is, yeah, like doing whatever nearby states first, meeting bands that you like and that are cool with, and then starting to branch out more with those bands instead of just kind of aimlessly, throwing darts and kind of going off. I'm not saying that you'll fail that way, but it just feels a
Yeah.
little more like you have a support system in place, and you'll at least have some backing to it or a little bit of structure. It seems more like.
Yeah, there definitely was more of a support system, more so than I feel like there is now. Like back then, like you could play all these little towns. You could like, you could book. Sometimes like we had a lot of people like hitting us up too. It wasn't even like we were doing a whole lot of outreach really. Like someone would ask us like, "Hey, you wanna play my like little college town
Yeah.
like Saturday such and such a date," and then we would book a whole trip around that,
Yeah.
you know Like it was almost like, someone would give us the idea, and we'd just be like, hey, like can we make this like more than just this show? Because I mean, it's kind of far away. Like maybe we could do other dates around it. So yeah, that's kind of what we would do. And then Josh actually graduated the year before me because he didn't change his major. So he was a 2004. He graduated at the same time as Dan Deacon, and I stayed one more year. And during that year, Josh, effectively kept writing, and we were able to kind of, like work on tours, when I was in school, and other people in the band were in school as well. And then I graduated, and then we were able to actually go on like some longer tours. Nice. So our first jaunt out to the Midwest was actually to Chicago and back. But we didn't actually play Chicago. we actually, because we couldn't get a Chicago show. Like, we were just like, yeah, I mean, Chicago's probably just like New York City, but in the Midwest. Like, it's going to be hard to book something there. So we ended up just booking this suburb, actually out in Indiana, Crown Point, Indiana. Yeah. There was this. There used to be this coffee shop called Java Joe's.
Yeah, I heard of that. I don't know if we ever played it, but I remember always looking at their site and being like, "Oh, we need an Indiana day. Let's hit them up."
Oh yeah, and it was great. And it's funny, like I didn't realize how close to Chicago it was. It's like to me, we had played. Actually, no, that was our first time ever playing Indiana. That was our like kind of I didn't realize how far like northwest we were. I was just like, oh, we're in Indiana, cool. Right. And then that whole run was with our friend Ramona Cordova, and he was just like an acoustic act. So he traveled in the van with us, and he would open all the shows with us. But the one show on the tour that he got that we couldn't get on was Chicago at the Empty Bottle. So that's why we didn't play Chicago, because we couldn't get on the show. Like we, he booked it, and he was like, sorry, they said the bill's already full. So the way it ended up working out was we all played Crown Point the night before, and then we drove him up to Chicago. And I remember the show. So now, like, Empty Bottle is the first bar in Chicago that I've ever hung out at.
Oh, that's cool.
That was my first impression of a Chicago show, was an Empty Bottle. I think. Yeah, it was in January of 2005.
Oh, and damn, that had to be nice and chilly too.
Oh yeah, it was really cold. And I remember one of the other bands on the bill was Bound Stems. I don't know if you know
that
them.
That name does sound familiar, but I can't think of anything about it though.
Yeah, they were still active when I moved here, but I guess they split up maybe soon after that. But yeah, they were pretty active throughout the aughts. Is that what you call it? Yeah. Early 2000s, mid to late 2000s. And so that was the first time I heard about them. And like I watched them play, and I was like, damn it, why are we not on this show? Like this is like the perfect band for us to play with. This is the perfect band for us to network with, and to kind of, and this is the Chicago band. So I was like, all right, don't get pissed off about it. Network with this band, trade CDs, like make a plan for the next time you come through Chicago, because the next time you come through has to be with them.
That's a good thought to have. I think a lot of people would have just been pissed and been like gone back in the van and left. Like that was pretty good.
Yeah, even though we weren't on the show, the venue staff still allowed us to like hang out.
That's good.
So we were still able to, like hang out with, like the people who worked there. We left them a CD. They understood what the situation was. And also, I mean, it wasn't that well of attended of a show either. It wasn't like it was crazy. It was on like a weeknight too. It wasn't like there were maybe 20 people there. So it was kind of one of those shows where the staff they aren't so busy where they can't pay attention to what's going on with the show. Like they knew what the situation was, and they were like, yeah, I mean, sorry we couldn't get you on the show, like we'll definitely check out the record. And we were able to like hang out downstairs in the green room with Bound Stems. We made friends with them. And I remember them telling me, like, they were like, well, we can't really tour too much because our van can't go up hills. Because I asked them, I was like, you guys should come out to the East Coast. Like, we'll totally bring you out. Like, you guys can play shows with us, and then like we'll do like a show trade,
Yeah.
and they were like, we can't go to the East Coast because our band can't go up hills. And I was just like, man, like that is the most Midwestern thing I've ever heard, because like that was like the first thing I noticed. Like as soon as we crossed into the Ohio border, like
Yeah.
we were all like East Coast kids. We had all grown up in areas where like it's super hilly. All of a sudden everything just gets flat.
Yep. Yeah.
And we're just like, everything is so flat. It's like creepy almost. And then, these like Midwestern kids are telling me, yeah, we can't drive anywhere where there's hills. I'm just like,
That's
I was
awesome.
like, oh man, that sucks. Yeah. So it's like, well, it's a good thing that you only play in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Because you can't go anywhere.
No.
So like we made friends with those guys, and then it wasn't like the next time we came through we ended up playing with them. I think we continued struggling trying to find a Chicago show for like the next couple years until we eventually played the Metro with you guys.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean that ended up being our first Chicago
That's
show.
right. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember when we had that show, and I was either talking to you or Josh or someone, and you're like, "Yeah, this is our first Chicago show." I'm like, "This is a pretty sweet Chicago show, the first Chicago show, the Metro." But
Yeah.
funny enough, the first Chicago show I ever played was at the Metro because it was for a battle of the bands for the high school band I was in. They had it at the Metro, and it was
Wow.
one of those ones where you sell tickets to get in.
Yeah.
So one of those classic rip-offs. But
Yeah.
I can say too, my first Chicago show was at the Metro. So that's a good jumping off point, I'd say. Even though you can go back and play all kinds of other places. That's my favorite venue. But I think that's awesome. That's the first place you guys played.
Yeah, I mean, we really lucked out too, because I mean, your guy, between all the bands on that bill, like
Yeah.
we got a pretty serious crowd out.
Yep.
I seem to remember it was sold out, I think.
If it wasn't, it was close because I remember we stacked it. It wasn't the first Metro show we played, but it was like the second. And each time they let us pick the whole lineup, so we got to pick friend bands and bands we loved and knew they could draw. So we typically could get, if not sold out, pretty close to. So I remember it being a good show. Yeah.
Yeah, do you remember who else played? I seem to remember the White Tie Affair was on.
That band I can't speak to because that was not a band that we were friends with or a band that we liked. It was a band that a guy that we knew who worked at Epic Records, who when we were talking to both Vagrant and Epic, he was excited about that band and they were going to sign them, and then they ended up signing them. And I was talking to him at some point and said we were playing the Metro and we had one more spot to fill, and he asked me as a favor to put them on that show. So that wasn't even a band we knew. I remember actually coming around the corner at the Metro and they were doing like a promo photo shoot, and I just rolled my eyes like that. The little bit that I had to deal with them, they were nice guys, but like not our style of music, and that was like a favor. And actually, I think I have the show flyer somewhere, so I'll look up who else was on there. But off the top of my head, I don't remember because, like I said, we played 2 or 3 times at the Metro, so I remember the bands we played with, but not specifically like which show was the lineup. So
yeah.
But they did play that. You're right. They did play that show.
Yeah, and it would have been the other band that was on our tour, Rediscover. And
yeah. Wait,
and I can't.
That's true. When I think about that tour, I just think about us and you guys. I forget Rediscover was on that tour because they did a lot of the booking for that, right?
Right. They did like Toledo, Bowling Green.
Those were good shows too. I mean, packed shows. Yeah.
Yeah, they were. But yeah, I don't remember who the 5th band was on the Metro show. I remember those 4, but yeah, I don't know. It was a pretty insane show. Whatever. Like when we went on, it was pretty much already packed.
Yeah.
So I mean, whenever you can open a 5-band bill and it's already packed when you go on, is a pretty awesome thing. And it only happens like once in a blue moon. It only happened for us maybe 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty amazing experience, and we really like the crowd really liked us.
Yeah,
they really got into it, and we sold a lot of merch. And I was like, if this is our first Chicago experience, then we need to keep this up. We need to have Chicago be like one of our key markets, and we need to just blast this place and just come here on every single tour because like it's clear that people are digging what we're doing, and it definitely we definitely tried to do that, but I mean each time we came back through, we continued to play really great shows, but it wasn't like the same size venue as the Metro. I mean, obviously you can't expect that. So I mean, we continued to come through, and we did like Beat Kitchen opening for Fake Problems.
Oh, okay.
Um,
And the
what else?
Abbey, we played with you guys at the Abbey with
Oh,
Death.
with Murder by Death, that was the other really good
Yep.
one. That one was sold out. And that show was originally supposed to be at the Metro. I don't know if you remember
I
that.
don't remember that.
Yeah, like when we first got the tour routing the month previous, we were like, "Oh, we're gonna go back to the Metro. That's awesome!" And like literally the next day, it said change to the Abbey. And honestly, I can't really remember why. I don't know if it was because they didn't sell as many tickets as they
Oh,
were
okay.
expecting, or if they were trying to make it a sold out show.
Gotcha.
But yeah, but I was like, well, I mean, whatever. We're opening for Murder by Death in
Yeah.
Chicago, and Dr. Manhattan are on the bill.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Like
a good show. I remember that one too.
yeah, one of the most insane bills. I mean, just Murder by Death, you guys, O Death, and us.
Yeah. That was fun.
and it was completely packed the entire time.
Yeah.
It's a really really great show. So yeah, and then we brought you guys out to the East Coast on
Yep.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Knitting Factory in Manhattan.
Yep. Yep.
The old Knitting Factory.
Yep. I remember that one because that was when a bunch of Andrew's family came and they were just hooting and hollering and we were just laughing and loving it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an intense show. I remember like people, yeah. It was the middle room.
Yep.
It wasn't the big room, but it wasn't like the super small basement, but it was the middle room. And that was I think that was the only time we ever played that room. It was but yeah, I remember that crowd being very rowdy, and I
Yeah.
remember it still being daylight outside too. It wasn't. It was June, so it was and it was kind of an early show. So I mean, it started at like 6, and like we were playing at like 8 or 9, and I was like, wow, this is awfully rowdy for like this is really intense.
Yeah.
I love it.
How did that tour? How did that tour come to you guys? Because it came to us, I think, through our manager. So like, was that like you and I forget, like, because I think you explained to me at one point how that tour came together.
Yeah, it was through Eyeball.
Okay.
Yeah, they knew that we were like looking for tours all the time,
Gotcha.
and that was like our thing. We just we got to be on tour. We just got to stay on the road.
Yep.
And so they were just like, hey, we're working on this package with this band from Chicago called Dr. Manhattan. Check them out. And I'll admit we were skeptical at first.
Yeah.
we were just like, really? Because before you guys got signed,
Yep.
like our first impression of you guys was your MySpace page, and and we were just like, really? We were just like, why does our label think that this would be a good fit for a tour? And
That's
then we
awesome.
discover they were like the exact
Right.
opposite.
Yeah.
They were totally not the kind of band we wanted to be touring with. Like we thought of ourselves as like a weird band. Like
Yeah.
we were like, we need to play with bands that are like weird. Like,
Yeah.
like we want to find like the Captain Beefheart
Yeah.
of this generation and play with them and tour with them. Like, but the thing that we didn't really realize at the time was signing with Eyeball kind of almost like it pigeonholed us in a way where we were not going to find that band.
Well, I think it was like you guys were the weird band to a lot of these labels. Like, I think they were putting together tours and they wanted an interesting band, so they got you. But you guys were looking like, oh, we want to get with like-minded bands in the weird band. So I think you guys ended up kind of becoming the band that you like wanted to tour with almost.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we got on so many weird tours. Like we opened for Action Action. They were
Yeah.
like that pop band on Victory.
Yep.
And yeah, we were the only weird band. Like that entire bill was just like pop, pop, pop. And then
Yep.
we were like this weird band that was opening every night. And like, I'm sure people showed up and were just like, am I at the right show?
Yep.
Like, what is going on?
That was almost our exact trajectory, and in that we wanted to tour with sweet bands, and then we ended up being on like very poppy or very specific tours that we just like were this weird band on. Oh, it was
Yeah.
very similar.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can't remember what finally, I mean, we looked at our situation. We were just like, well, yeah, I mean, we want to be on the road, and we've never played Chicago before. They're from Chicago, so it makes sense. I mean, we might as well just do Chicago, with this open invite. and we saw that you guys had already had like most of the Midwest booked, and
Oh, that's right. We
and
each kind of booked our own
yeah,
areas. That's right. I remember that now.
yeah, and we were like, yeah, we could do the East Coast. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. It was something about the routing. It was like it started in Chicago, so we basically drove out there
Yeah.
from New York, and as far as like we had just played a show in New York. Actually, we played at the crop the the cake shop,
Okay.
like 2 days before that. So we played at the cake shop, and um, the Chicago Metro show ended up being our first show with that big bus that we had.
Oh,
Um,
nice. I remember
and there
that.
was a whole, yeah, there was a whole story behind that where we had this van, we had a smaller bus with a trailer, and we drove away from the cake shop show, and streets in New York City are like really bumpy, and we already knew that our van was starting to have problems,
Yeah.
so the entire exhaust manifold like fell out of the
Hmm.
bottom as we left the New York show right before a tour. This is like our last like hometown show before doing this tour,
Uh,
and all of a sudden like our bus was broken, and luckily I had already put down for the insurance on the new bus,
nice.
because Josh, thank him, somehow he had the foresight. He was like, dude, we should really just get this new bus for this tour. And I was like, all right, I'll get the insurance on it, but I just don't know how we're going to actually like pay for the bus. Like
Right.
let's maybe put that off, and let's see if we can get through this tour with the old bus. So it was kind of like we answered our own question. Our bus literally like just broke.
Sometimes life
So
finds a way, man.
exactly. So we just went down to Long Island where they had like this bus lot, and we had already been looking at it. We already knew that we pretty much wanted it. It was really just a matter of having the money to buy it. Like all their buses, they were all $3,500. They were getting rid of these buses that had been used by school systems for the maximum amount of time, which was 7 years, I guess,
Yeah.
is how long they can use them before they have to retire. So we just went down there, and one of us just wrote a check. It was a, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was the only way to really do it. I mean,
Right.
we were always broke, so it was just kind of like, we need this bus, we got to do it, because otherwise we can't do the tour.
Yeah.
So we get the bus. There were like, we hadn't done anything with it. Like none of the doors had locks on them or anything like that. But we drove away from the lot, drove up to closer to like Josh's place where like all the equipment was, and we basically had to switch out all the gear from the old bus, put it in the new bus, and we hadn't taken out any of the seats or anything in the new bus, so we basically had to just improvise, like put all the gear on all the seats effectively,
Like
and
all
then
the kids riding on the bus.
yeah, exactly, and then just figure out where we were going to sit. So basically we had figured out that we had to bring the old bus back to Josh's dad's junkyard. Luckily his dad runs a junkyard. So we basically were going to get that bus junked for the metal and get, whatever money we could get out of it. So effectively we had to drive the bus, and we put, for some reason, Pat, our bass player at the time, got the job of driving the bus that had a broken exhaust system, and follow us down to Josh's dad's junkyard. And the whole time his head is like out of
Oh man.
the driver's side window, trying not to inhale exhaust fumes. I don't know
Poor
how
Pat.
he ended up doing that. So luckily it was only like maybe like an 8 mile drive or something,
Yeah.
but the whole time, like the bus is just like, it's just leaking exhaust everywhere, and it's like super loud. It's like brrr, like all down the road. And so we drop it off. Everyone gets in the new bus. We got all the gear, so we're like, all right, time to hit the road. We'll figure out everything else later. So we get on the highway, and I didn't sleep all that night because we basically had to get the old bus back up to my house, and then I had to hop on the train, get back down to the city to meet up with Mike, our guitar player at the time, to then go and get the bus. So I ended up not sleeping that night. So I was completely sleep deprived. As soon as we hit the road in the new bus, I have no, like, I'm just going on faith that this bus is gonna like operate the way that it's supposed to, and that I don't have to worry about it, and I can just go to sleep. And that's exactly what I did. I fell asleep somewhere near like where like New York becomes New Jersey, and I slept all the way to the Ohio border. I woke up like sometime in the middle of the night, and Pat was driving, and I was like, "Dude, where are we?" He was like, "Oh, we're about to cross into Ohio." I was like, "Dude, that's crazy. This bus is killing it. This is awesome." The only thing I had any problem with that bus was it wouldn't go any faster than 60 miles an hour.
Right.
So, I mean, granted, it was super safe. Like, we were in this, like, it was a tank.
Yeah.
It felt like a tank. Like, we felt so invincible in that thing, and we could never speed. It couldn't go faster than 60. So I was like, yeah, finally, we have, like, a vehicle that I feel, like, comfortable with. This is cool.
Yeah.
And so then I took over the drive, and then I think and eventually we got into Chicago at maybe like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And like, I don't know, we had never been here before, so we didn't know like where like the cool areas were or anything. So we basically just we just got off at a random exit kind of near downtown.
Yeah.
Looking back now, I think we might have been kind of like in the South Loop. I think that's kind of where we were, and we found like a falafel place to eat at. Nice. And then got back on the road, and then we were like, yeah, I mean, we might as well just get to the metro. So we plugged the address into GPS and got up there, and we get to the metro, and I quickly realized, hey, this might not be the safest place to just like leave a bus without locks on it. Sure. And all of our gear inside. So luckily there was like the venue staff was already there. So they were like, yeah, I mean, if you guys want to just park like back into the, how they have that lot right next to it that you can park a couple vans and trailers in. Mm-hmm. We backed our bus into there because we were the first band there, and we told them what the situation was, and they were like, wow, it's been a while since we've had a school bus pull up here. This is awesome. So luckily, I mean, the back door was the thing that we were most concerned with. So we backed that up flush to the wall there to basically, make it so that it was borderline safe. And we're like, all right, next show is in Iowa. We'll find some place to get a lock. We'll weld it, know. And then we played that show with you guys, and it was great. And like we like became instant friends. Like we were not planning. We were not thinking that we were going to become like instant, lifelong friends with anybody that night. And it just clicked.
That's
what
happens.
Yeah. And like we saw, you guys saw us play, we saw you guys play, we hung out, and we were just like, yeah, we got to tour with these guys all the time. Yep. This is the kind of band that we need to be touring with, because, they're weird yet kind of accessible. They're doing bigger tours. And our label had already told us that you guys were talking to Vagrant, so
okay.
Yeah, we already kind of were aware of that, and but you guys, I don't believe you guys had fully signed.
No, not yet.
You didn't have the album out yet, so we basically were going on like faith. Like, we knew that sometimes when people say stuff like that, It doesn't really mean anything.
Yep.
It's like they're just trying to sell you on something. It's like, oh yeah, there's this band that's talking to Capitol Records. Sure. It's like, yeah, sure, yeah. But we kind of
came and stayed at my mom's house that night.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and then we both drove down to Iowa. The next show is Ottumwa, Iowa.
Yeah, the Casbah.
Yeah, yep. And there were like 10 people there.
What a contrast! The Metro sold out show to like less than 10 people.
Yeah, that was one of the craziest contrasts I'd ever seen on a tour. Like, we started off a tour playing for like 1,000 people. Next night, 10 people. And like a completely everything you could imagine that could have been different was different.
Yep.
And and it was run by that guy Jacob.
Yep.
And he would basically, like, when he knew a show was going to bomb, he would just invite his whole extended family, who were all basically living in that same house together.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did we all stay there together with him? Yeah. And
because I have pictures. I have pictures of Matt and Mike and Andrew skateboarding on the street in front of the house, and then us eating breakfast in the backyard.
Yeah, and that was when you and I we got on that seesaw or whatever that was. There's a
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a video somewhere on
Yeah.
YouTube, you and me on that little kid seesaw,
Yeah.
and I think we broke it because we
Yep.
were way too big for it. And Jacob was like, "Yeah, whatever, it's fine. I'll let the bands do whatever they want to do. I don't care." And
Yeah.
there were all these like little kids there who were just like, "Yeah, I don't care." So yeah, and you guys, the one show on that whole tour that Kiss Kiss just decided we didn't want to do, which looking back now is really kind of dumb. Like I don't like that we ever did this, but like if you're on a package tour, you generally,
Yeah.
unless you have a really good reason or you have been invited to hop onto another package or
Right.
you have some kind of reason why you have to, like dip out of the main package tour, you generally just stick with the package,
Right.
So Josh, our singer, was like, "What's up with this Oklahoma show?"
Yep. I remember that show very clearly.
First off, it's on a Monday night, and it's like completely out of the way. Like the routing makes no sense. It's on when it's on Monday night. Like
Yeah.
Josh was always the guy who was very like he would notice those kinds of things and be like, this doesn't make sense. And like I was like, whatever. Like we got to be down to do whatever. Like we
Yeah.
got to just play the game. So for whatever reason, like we all just we were like, yeah, I guess we won't do
You know
that.
what? And looking at it now, Josh was completely right. It was a show
Yeah.
where no one was there. I mean, we had fun. I have a distinct memory of we went to some thrift store and Matt bought like a kid's fireman's Halloween coat, and there was
Yeah.
like no air conditioning in this place, so we were just sweating like crazy. And it was just us and Rediscover, and I think it was even less attended than the Casbah show. I think there was like
Yeah.
2 people there.
Yeah.
And I think my whole thing was like, yeah, this is a tour. I can't let anyone down. Like, I don't want to have an off date. And
Yeah.
that's the only place that got back to me. And I was like, cool, Oklahoma sounds good. It's out of the way,
Tahlequah.
but if it's a good show, we'll figure it out. And it was just a dud.
Yeah, it was. What was the name of that town? Tahlequah,
That sounds
Oklahoma.
that sounds familiar. I think I might even have the routing somewhere
Yeah,
in this room that I'm in right now. But that does sound like it's right. Yeah.
yeah, and that it was just barely in the northeastern corner of Oklahoma. So it wasn't like we had to go all the way to like Oklahoma City or anything like that, but it was still out of the way from the rest of the
Yeah.
parade. So what we did was while you guys went off to Oklahoma, and I believe you guys canoed or something like that too. I remember seeing some kind of picture
Maybe.
or something
I do
where
not remember.
you guys were in like water somewhere in
Okay.
Oklahoma. It looked like you were having a lot of fun, and I was like, damn it, why didn't we go? But it worked out for us because actually we did have kind of a good reason to stay in Iowa. That day that you guys went to Oklahoma, we fixed up our bus.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we got locks for all the doors. Like Jacob basically drove us around town. He's like, "Where do you guys need to go?" We're like, "We need to go to a hardware store. We need to," and he had like so many awesome tools. Like this was like a handyman, like Midwest. Like we're just like a bunch of East Coast punks. Like we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
He was like, "Yeah, I'll build you guys a lock." So he just like he gave us his drill. Like we drilled holes. We put bolts in, carriage bolts, like just made the whole thing secure.
That's awesome.
Granted, we didn't take out any of the seats on that run,
Yeah.
but we at least got it secure so that we could drive around the country and not worry about our stuff getting
Sure.
broken into. So yeah, and then we met back up with you guys in Mount Vernon, Illinois,
Yep.
at the living room.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
played there a handful of times. I don't remember if our show with you guys there, if that was. Do you remember I don't remember how it was attended. I just remember we'd play there, and the owner, I forget his name, Uncle. I always call him Uncle Tom, Uncle Tom.
Tom
And
Schroeder.
he'd always get a Fazoli's pasta, I think it was. Yep.
Yeah,
I just remember that he always took care of the bands. He's always super nice and always
Yeah.
had dinner for you and make sure we'd all get paid and stuff. I don't remember if it was like well attended, but I just remember all those shows were fun.
Yeah, it was okay. It was
Yeah.
okay attended, and he did. Yeah, he always fed the bands, and he would always put the bands up too. He lived in the middle of nowhere,
Yep.
like, and he took us out to where he lived, and it was actually kind of like almost like halfway between Mount Vernon and St. Louis. So we followed him out there, and like we were all just like, oh, wow, this is awesome. We're just like in the middle of nowhere. Like
Yeah.
we could just get like some nice quiet sleep and just like go out in the field and chill, hang out. Yeah, and so yeah, I mean that was a nice, it was a weird start to a tour, and then
Yep.
and then I remember 2 or 3 dates fell through too. You remember that? There was one promoter who booked us in like two different towns. I want to say like Columbus and Port Huron, Michigan.
Oh, is that when we camped out and just?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I do remember that.
we camped out in Michigan, and I got bitten by a tick in the night.
Oh
And I woke
God.
up and there was this tick hanging on me, hanging on my chest, and I was like, "What do I do?" And we called the ranger. We told them that that we have a tick problem,
Yeah.
and this like an hour later, this ranger comes over, and she's like, "Here, get over here." She lights a cigarette and burns it on my chest. Yeah, so even now I still have like a little kind of scar that
That's
itches
awesome.
every now and then from that. So yeah, I'll always remember June 2007 tour with Dr. Manhattan, getting bit by a tick. I
Cigarette
still have
burn.
still have the cigarette burn from
That's awesome.
that.
Well, dude, that you have a great memory because there's stuff in there that I totally forgot about, and you completely jogged my memory on little tidbits in there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
and that being like our first big tour, like in terms of being with bands who were on labels and had shows that were packed and stuff like that was one for us that was so like formative in us as a band and how to book tours and how to like approach the whole process. It was so much fun because I remember
Yeah.
we stayed with Wes in Ohio and those shows were good, and then just go. It was the first. I think it was the first time we would gone out to the East Coast, and those shows
Yeah.
were fun. So every little part of it was like, yeah, it was like the first time you do anything. So everything was like, oh, look at this thing, and oh, this thing. It was
Yeah.
like brand new eyes. And then that was the tour that Pat almost killed me. So
Yeah.
I'll never forget that either. Going,
Was that when you guys went up to Connecticut
Yep,
and went like rope swing
yep,
jumping?
yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't there.
Yeah,
I
you were
think
not there.
yeah,
Rebecca. It was Rebecca and Mike, I think.
yeah.
That's it. Oh, and Pat.
Yeah.
And then all of us, and it was a full. I mean, the day itself was awesome. It was rope swinging and just driving around, listening to music, and just tons of
Yeah.
laughs. And then
Yeah.
finally, this river that Pat's just like, yeah, man, we used to swim across this thing drunk all the time. It's no problem. We go over there, we hit this rope swing, and we're like, yeah, that's great. And we're all super, just so full of energy and excitement, and just idiotically like we all did, but like even me especially, charge the river Braveheart style and just swim as hard as I can, like, oh, we're gonna beat you there, this is so much fun. And then like I just feel it like in my chest, like, oh man, I'm getting pretty tired, but this isn't so bad, and blah blah. And all of a sudden I just hear Pat yell, we're halfway. And at that point I was like, I thought we were like about to hit rocks and like hit land, and he said we're halfway, and I'm like, this is not good, this is not a good thing that's about to happen. And I already underestimated my skills as a swimmer, and it just all
Oh,
came to a halt, a screeching halt right there.
wow.
And I just remember being like, I was swimming next to Mike and Matt, and being like, yeah, I don't know, like like I don't know if this is what actually happened, but it felt like one of my lungs just stopped. Like I felt like I was just running on one lung, and my
Oh,
legs were just like jelly. And I was like, I'm going down. Like a couple times I went under and came back up, and I was like, this isn't good. And then
yeah.
I remember I was like shouting out to Mike, like, man, you got to come get me. And he came out, and he kind of like, he didn't like full on grab me, but he like kept me afloat, like pushing me
Oh,
up. And then we
wow.
ended up on the other side, just like all of us just like dumbfounded, and it starts raining. And
Oh,
and I think Rebecca and Reed and a couple others stayed on the other side, and we're like, what's going on? Like, is Nick dead? Like, what is happening? And then we were just standing there in the rain, shivering, like, all right, let's go home. And this boat full of like idiot douchebags came up, and we're like,
oh,
hey, can we get a ride? And they're like, yeah, do a backflip. And we're like, yeah, one of our buddies just almost died. Do you want to just give us a ride? And they just like tore out of there,
oh,
didn't give us a ride. And then this like Vietnam vet came through and was like, yeah, hop on. And as
oh.
he's bringing us to the other side, he's like, oh, don't call the cops though, because I got like a record. I don't want to like get involved.
Ah!
And they had already called, I think, the cops or something. So he just dropped us off and left, and nothing came of it. But like
Oh,
after that, like we were just all like shooken up by the whole day. And then even that night, we stayed with someone, not Pat, maybe Pat's parents or something, because we went to like a really nice house in Connecticut and like washed up. And then we heard about some open mic. We're like, all right, let's just go play that. So like we just
yep.
went to some it was like a coffee house library open mic where Mike played guitar, and I played drum. It was like some hodgepodge of all of us, and it was really fun. But as we were like sitting there playing, it was just like I just sat there. I was like, I almost died today. What are we doing right now? I should probably
Yeah.
just like go to bed. It's just so weird.
Yeah.
So I
That's
mean,
crazy. I never heard that story.
I never.
All
That's incredible. I thought we all had like a powwow and taught and said that story. I can't believe that.
No, I never heard that story because I wasn't there and no one told me about it. Like
Wow.
it was never the kind of thing that Mike or Rebecca ever like relayed to the rest of the
Really?
band. Thing Pat
That
never
is
said anything.
incredible. And
Yeah, I mean, I've
there's.
seen that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say. I think we were gonna say the same. That video that they made.
Yep, the
Yeah.
YouTube video.
Yeah.
That's a like it's an awesome video. It's
Yeah.
like
And
it makes it look like you guys had like the best time ever.
yep.
Like it doesn't show any of the rain. It
Nope.
doesn't show the drowning. It doesn't-
It was a perfect vacation wrap up with none of the bad stuff. But it also shows Rebecca eat so much shit when she jumped
Yep.
off the cliff. Like we felt so bad because and even still this day it's kind of bad. But like I at that time and way early before I was so afraid of heights. And they went up on these like little, I don't know how tall they were, but they seemed like cliffs. And they were jumping off and having a
Yeah.
hoot, and some Marine that was there like went even higher and jumped, and we were just
Oh.
like, there's footage of that too. We were just like losing our minds laughing, and they said like when you jump off, you kind of like have to go feet first and like scoop your body so you don't hit the ground. And Rebecca, just poor thing, just went
she did
like
the opposite.
flat,
Just
yeah.
back flapped on it.
Oh, and that sound, it was like a shotgun or something. Like
Yeah.
as soon as it happened, like pain came of that, and then the next day. Like her whole leg was it looked like someone had just mugged her. Like,
Yeah.
just destroyed.
Yeah, we definitely saw that. Like Josh and I were just like, "What happened to you?" Like the concern was not you; it was.
Right. Yep.
Like, we didn't even know. Like
Yeah.
we were just like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, we went base jumping or whatever rope swinging or whatever." But yeah, you're right. Like even now, not because of anything bad that ever happened to me, but I won't jump from like
Yep.
a cliff into water where I can't see through it.
Yep.
I just don't, if I can't see what's underneath the water line, I won't do it.
It's probably a good rule. It's probably just a
Yeah.
good human being rule to not do that and to not have to learn the hard way. Just don't
Yeah, I
jump off a
just-
cliff into water you don't see the end of.
yeah. Because I do remember this other time on tour, we went to like the Iowa River. I don't remember quite where we were. It was like either in like Iowa City, somewhere around there, and we basically went and did the same thing. And like Pat was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna jump off," and of course, like he just does it. Like
Right,
it's no
yeah.
big deal. Like these cliffs were probably maybe 20, 30 feet tall, and I'm just like, no, I'm just gonna watch.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
but
that was such a good, like I said, such a good tour for us to
Yeah.
learn so much and to do it with such a fun band and like become lifetime friends with.
Yeah.
I hate to even cut this short because we didn't even get into like hidden hospitals or like your trek into moving to Chicago.
yeah.
But usually I try. I think now that I'm starting this up again, I'm gonna try to keep it around like an hour-ish or a little over, and we're like
Okay.
almost an hour and a half. But
Yeah.
I think we need
Yeah,
to do
okay.
a part 2 of like you coming to Chicago, how hidden hospitals started, like that whole journey and what that's doing. And if and what I meant to ask at some point, which I can just ask now, because I want to play a Kiss Kiss song. What is in your estimation like your favorite song? Whether I don't know if it has sentimental value or just the one that like, you know what, this one I listen to and I feel like it's the best overall Kiss Kiss song.
Probably the Cats in Your House.
Okay.
Yeah, because that one, I feel like we all came together as a band on that one. I
Okay.
mean, Josh wrote the original kind of like that opening, that melody,
Yep.
and we first started working on it when we were all living in a band house together, kind of near Poughkeepsie, New York,
Mm-hmm.
and he just had this melody and he had like a verse and a chorus, but he couldn't figure out where he wanted to go from there. And then we like left on tour, just didn't really revisit it for a while. And then he was like, yeah, let's get that song back. Let's see where we want to go with that. And it kind of like slowly started, like, we started to kind of speed it up a tiny bit, because originally it was very slow, and I was like, yeah, like this feels more right. And then I don't remember how, but somehow we came up with the idea to do some sort of like, to just kind of like have it go somewhere else, like to have it almost be like a channel change. And I don't know, somehow we came up with that, like that weird do 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 do, that like bass thing. And we were like, we want it to, like, we want this whole bridge section to almost like, we had all these different variations of what we wanted to do, and then we kind of just like put it in order, and we're like, we want this to almost be like a song within a song.
Nice.
And we all kind of like wrote that section together. And I remember also, just Josh and I, we were in a classroom at Purchase on a piano, and we were working on that, and he was playing like the lower like bass part. And at the time, and I still do, but at the time specifically, I was listening to a lot of Botch, and I was like, hey, how about this? And I started playing these like parallel half step, you know, and he was just like, wow, that's cool, but take the half step out. Like, I don't want it to be that dissonant. It's already going to be dissonant. And I was like, okay. And that's what eventually ended up being the violin part.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Interesting how you guys put songs together. It's so completely different from how we did.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was very much like we hardly ever wrote with the whole band. Like, we would start off with just Josh, and then Josh would bring stuff to me, and then he and I would work out the stuff together, and then we would bring it to the bass player, and then we would add Mike and Rebecca later. Yeah. But yeah, it was like a pyramid. We would start off with, like, you know, the foundation, and then we would add things as it went. Yeah. But that song I specifically remember. I just remember, like, I remember it being a really cool thing that this melody that I wrote became a super important melody in the song. Yeah. Because as a drummer, you never expect that to happen. You always expect to just, okay, well, I'll just arrange a drum part. Mm-hmm. You know, so it was nice to kind of have that input, and it all kind of, like, everyone had input. By the end of the song, everyone had contributed something like that. Awesome. And and it came together, and it's still one of my favorite songs of ours to listen to.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, thank you. I mean, we talked a good like hour and a half or so we could have easily jumped another hour just talking about what's going on now, and I think we'll have to pick that up as a part 2, because I want to hear about that little journey. But yeah, man, thank you. Appreciate you talking about all this stuff. It's good. It was a good trip down memory lane. Yeah, no problem. Let's do a part 2 where we can talk about hidden hospitals and like me actually living in Chicago and not being a New York guy anymore. You know. Awesome. That sounds good, man. Talk to you soon. All right, buddy. See ya.